The night they came for me, the air in my little apartment was thick with the smell of lemon dish soap and cheap pasta. I was holding a dish sponge, humming off-key to the radio, and thinking about how I was going to pay the electric bill. I was just Sarah Miller, a single mom in the city of Philadelphia, living life one mundane chore at a time. Then, the quiet outside broke. The first black car, a huge, silent thing, stopped right outside my window. The kind of car you only see in bad movies or on the news. I froze. My heart jumped straight up my throat. But before I could even drop the sponge, another one pulled up right behind it. I scrambled for my phone, hands shaking, thinking I needed to call 911. But as I grabbed it, the screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "We see you." I thought it was some sick spam, maybe some kids messing around. A cold, sick feeling washed over me, but I almost dismissed it until the second message buzzed through, sharp and undeniable, "Sarah." I looked out the window and saw men getting out in the pouring rain. Huge men in expensive dark suits, moving with a terrifying kind of purpose. One of them, taller, broader than the rest, looked up, his eyes shielded by the brim of his hat, and stared directly into my third-floor window. He wasn't looking near my apartment. He was looking right at me. That was the night my innocent text, a simple message I thought was meant for a friend, reached the wrong man. Or maybe the one man who was going to save me from the life I didn't even know I was living. If you think you know what happens next, trust me, you don't. This story isn't about me running away. It's about walking right into a fire I didn't even know existed. The only way you're going to hear how a dirty dish sponge saved my life is by sticking around. Hit that subscribe button now. I promise you, you'll want to hear every minute of this story, because it only gets more intense from here. I keep replaying that moment, that ordinary moment. The air was a little chilly, the window was fogged up, and I was exhausted. It was Tuesday, 8 o'clock, which meant it was the 2 hours between putting my daughter Lily to bed and collapsing myself. I was 32 years old, working 2 jobs, one as a medical billing clerk from home, the other waiting tables at a diner called the Morning Star, and my life was a relentless cycle of exhaustion and caffeine. Lily, my 7-year-old, was my universe. She was a tiny, fierce redhead, and everything I did, every bill I stressed over, was for her. I just finished reading her The Tale of Peter Rabbit for the 100th time, tucked her under her favorite blanket, the one with the faded unicorns, and silently closed the door to her room. The bills were splayed out on the kitchen counter like bad omens. The electricity, the gas, the last payment for Lily's emergency trip to the dentist. I needed to send a text to my friend Jessica, who worked at the diner, asking if she could cover my Saturday shift so I could pick up a double on Friday instead. I needed the extra $100. My fingers were trembling a little. Not from fear, just fatigue. I quickly typed out the message. "Hey Jess, need sat off, can cover fried double. Urgent, let me know. Thanks." I pressed send before I even looked. A simple mistake. I had just changed Jessica's number a few weeks ago, and my brain was running on fumes. I typed 1 digit wrong. Just 1. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with a reply. Not from Jessica, whose profile picture was a terrible selfie of her and a cat. This number was blank. No picture, no name. The message read, "Who is this and why is your request urgent?" My heart gave a little skip. Oh, great, I thought. A cranky stranger. I typed back, feeling a flush of embarrassment. "So sorry, wrong number. My apologies." I was about to put the phone down and go back to scrubbing the spaghetti sauce off the stove when the reply came back, instant and sharp, like a slap in the face. "You don't sound sorry. You sound desperate. "What are you running from, Sarah?" That's when the humming stopped. How did they know my name? I hadn't given it. I hadn't signed the text. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the chilly apartment air. I quickly deleted the entire thread, feeling a sudden intense need to erase the interaction, even though I knew it was useless. Then I heard the sound. Not loud, but distinctive, in the dead silence of our street in South Philly. The low, heavy idle of a massive engine. I walked to the living room window, pulling back the dusty mini blinds, just a crack, and I saw the first car. It was a black luxury sedan, the kind that looked like it had been carved out of a block of polished marble. No logos, no license plate I could read from here. It was parked 2 doors down from my building, engine running, headlights off. Before I could process the sudden violent thumping in my chest, the second car, an SUV, dark gray, tinted windows, pulled up behind it, boxing me in. My curiosity was instantly replaced by an electric spike of pure, raw terror. This wasn't a wrong number. This was something else. This was a takedown. I backed away from the window, stumbling over a pile of Lily's coloring books. I wanted to scream, but my throat was closed up tight. The air in the room felt too thick to breathe. I scrambled into the narrow hallway that led to the bedrooms, whispering, "Lily, Lily, stay asleep," a useless mantra that did nothing but make me feel worse. Just as I got halfway down the hall, the sound of the front door buzzer, a loud, obnoxious bzzz that always startled me, sliced through the apartment. They weren't waiting. I tiptoed back to the peephole. My hand was so sweaty I could barely hold the phone, which was now silent. Through the tiny lens, the hallway was dark. There was a man. He was tall, perfectly silhouetted by the dim light of the hallway. He wasn't aggressive, not yet. He wasn't pounding on the door. He was just waiting and watching the peephole, as if he knew I was looking back at him. I thought of calling the police, but before I could dial, I heard a sound that made me nearly drop my phone. It wasn't the buzzer. It was a thud from the window and a scraping sound. I raced back to the living room. Someone was trying to pry the downstairs window open. They were coming in. I had maybe 5 seconds. My mind screamed at me, "Get Lily! Run!" I swung open the apartment door, throwing caution, logic, and sanity to the wind. Maybe if I faced them, I could distract them from the window. The man who had been waiting outside stepped back 1 pace, giving me room to fully open the door. The moment he did, the shadows seemed to lift off him, and I saw him clearly for the first time. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. His suit wasn't just expensive, it was perfectly tailored, the kind that looked like it was molded to his body. He had dark, intense eyes and a strong jaw, set hard. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't carrying a weapon in his hand, and he wasn't smiling. His silence was the most powerful thing about him. This was Marco. He didn't move past the threshold. He just looked at me, at my pajama top, my messy bun, the dish sponge still clutched in my hand, with an expression of profound, tired impatience. He finally spoke, his voice a low, gravelly baritone, an accent I couldn't quite place, but definitely not local. It was the sound of authority, the kind that makes you instinctively obey. He stated, not asked, "You texted me." He looked at my face, then down to the sponge. "This is where you hide, in a kitchen sink." I could only stutter, my voice a pathetic squeak. "I have no idea who you are. It was a mistake, a wrong number. I was trying to text my friend Jess." His eyes narrowed, dismissing my explanation before I even finished it. He didn't believe a word. He raised one hand, pointed a single perfectly manicured finger at my chest,
and said the words that shattered my entire reality.
Say you don't have the file, Sarah. The file? I didn't know what he was talking about. What file? I didn't have anything. My confusion must have been real because he tilted his head, a flicker of something, doubt perhaps, crossing his face. He didn't wait for my answer. He simply reached out, placed his massive hand on the doorframe, and applied just enough pressure to push the door inward. I stood completely still, unable to move, unable to speak, the yellow sponge now clammy in my grip. He stepped fully inside the apartment, his polished shoe crossing my worn welcome mat. The sound was quiet, yet it felt like a gunshot. He reached back and pulled the door shut with a solid thud, plunging the small entryway into a sudden, terrifying darkness. I was trapped, alone, with a man who thought I was a thief, or worse. The silence was heavier than any shout. The sound of the door closing was the sound of my life splitting in two. One half was the mundane, tired life of Sarah Miller. The other was whatever this nightmare was, and I was standing right in the middle of it. Marco stood there, a granite statue in my tiny living room, a space instantly dwarfed by his presence. He wasn't loud, but the air vibrated with a contained, terrifying power. I could hear the men outside. I heard the crunch of their shoes on the gravel path. They were waiting for his signal. "Who are you?" I finally managed to whisper, the dish sponge dropping from my numb hand and splattering softly onto the linoleum floor. It seemed ridiculous, a small splash in this high-stakes moment. He ignored me. Instead, he gave a barely perceptible nod over my shoulder. Two men, as large and silent as he was, materialized from the dark hallway entrance. I hadn't even heard them enter. They were already there. "Check the perimeter," Marco commanded. They moved with the quiet efficiency of professional soldiers, or maybe something worse. One went straight to the kitchen window and peered out, checking the fire escape. The other swept through the small, clutter-filled hall, his eyes flicking over every corner, every shadow, every space big enough to hide something. The violation was immediate and total. This wasn't just my home anymore. It was a target zone. My only thought was Lily. I took a hesitant step back, instinctively trying to shield her room, which was just off the short hall. "My daughter," I said, the sound of her name giving me a sudden burst of defiance. "She's asleep. You will not go in there." Marco finally looked at me, truly looked at me, and that's when I felt the full force of his intelligence. His gaze was analytical, cold. He studied me like I was a faulty code he needed to debug. My messy hair, my cheap clothes, my obvious fear. He was trying to reconcile the desperate, exhausted woman in front of him with the dangerous, mysterious operative who had supposedly contacted him. "The girl," he said, the word simple, flat. "She is not the concern. The concern is that you have broken into my home, terrified me, and have men crawling all over my apartment." My voice had risen to a shout, laced with hysterical frustration. "Your story is weak," he said, dismissing my outburst with a wave of his hand. "A text sent to a wrong number, a single-digit error, and suddenly my team is here, 2 blocks from the location where a very important transaction was scheduled to take place at midnight."
I don't know anything about a transaction. I'm an accountant. I bill people for stitches and x-rays. I don't know the Mafia or whoever you are. I felt tears welling up, tears of exhaustion and sheer terror. He took a step closer. "Mafia? That is quaint, Sarah. We are a family, and families do not tolerate thieves." He pulled a thin, leather-bound wallet from his inner jacket pocket and flipped it open just enough for me to see a highly detailed picture of an official-looking badge and a name, Marco DeLuca. The name meant nothing to me, but the sheer, effortless arrogance of the gesture spoke volumes. He was a force, not a man. He motioned for me to hand him my phone. I hesitated, but the look in his eyes was non-negotiable. I unlocked it and handed it over. He navigated through my apps and texts with unnerving speed, his long fingers surprisingly deft. He wasn't looking for the deleted thread. He went into the Notes app, the place where I usually just jotted down grocery lists or reminders for Lily's school. He stopped, his eyes going wide for the first time. It wasn't a shocked look. It was a look of cold, murderous confirmation. He held the phone up to my face. Explain this. On the screen was a newly created note. I hadn't written it. I hadn't even opened the app today. The note was simple. 2 lines of text typed in a crisp black font. 44 North Street. Midnight. My blood ran so cold it felt like ice water had been poured directly into my veins. I never wrote that. I swear to God, I never touched that note. Marco's face was a mask of furious concentration. His initial doubt was gone, replaced by a terrible certainty. He lowered the phone, not looking at me, but staring intently at the screen. This is not a message from you. And the text you sent me to my private number, it was bait, a distraction, a warning. He went silent for a long moment. Then his eyes snapped up to mine. Someone has mirrored your phone. I didn't even understand the words. Mirrored? What does that mean? It means someone is watching every keystroke, every notification, every action on this device. They're seeing it, but they can also control it. They used your phone, your identity, to send me the address and the time. They used your text to establish a line of communication, and they used your text to put you in the middle of this. My mind spun. Who would do that? Who even could do that? The only person who knew all my passwords, who had access to my old devices, who knew how vulnerable I was my ex-husband, David. David was a low-level schemer, always looking for a quick payout and always running with the wrong crowd. But this was professional. Suddenly, Marco's men were back in the living room. Clear, the first man, a mountain of muscle named Vince, reported. Nothing but a lot of rabbit drawings.
Marco nodded, but his focus was still on me. He stepped right into my personal space, so close I could smell the expensive cologne and the faint scent of rain and smoke on his coat. He was no longer trying to intimidate me. He was trying to protect me. He leaned close, his voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper, the low tone vibrating against my ear. It was the most terrifying thing he had said all night. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. You're being watched right now, Sada, and they know you're talking to me. I didn't argue. I didn't even breathe. My eyes darted around the apartment, frantic and useless. Where? From the street? A drone? I felt totally exposed, stripped naked of my privacy and safety. Marco didn't waste a second. He moved to the living room window, pulling the thin plastic mini blinds completely out of the way, which felt like a massive risk. I gasped and stepped back, thinking he was making us a target. But he wasn't. He was showing me the target. He pointed a finger, steady as a rifle, toward the building directly across the narrow street, a block of old converted lofts. See it? He asked, his voice low and tight. I squinted. The rain was still coming down, making everything blurry and reflective. At first, I saw nothing but a dark window on the second floor. Then I saw it. Tucked just behind the frame of that window, almost invisible against the blackness, was a tiny, faint red light. It blinked, slow and rhythmic, like a diseased heart. What is that? I whispered, my mouth dry. That, Marco stated, his face grim, is an infrared camera, professional grade, fixed lens. Whoever put that there didn't want to just see you. They wanted to see everything that happened in this room, and they've been watching you for a long time, Sada. My stomach turned. All those nights I stood in the kitchen, humming, drinking lukewarm tea, thinking about my bills. All those mornings I waved goodbye to Lily as she left for school. Someone had been there, on the other side of that red pinprick, observing my mundane, struggling life, just waiting for the right moment. The feeling of invasion was overwhelming. Why? I pleaded. Why me? I have nothing. I'm broke. I'm completely uninteresting. Marco finally looked away from the window, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. They didn't want you, Sada. They wanted the drive they thought you had. And the camera was placed by the same person who had the capability to mirror your phone and send that midnight address to me. He paced the length of my tiny living room once, his energy like a physical wave. He was already thinking 10 steps ahead. They've used you to lure me to this block. They wanted my men to show up here thinking we were getting the file, so they could observe our reaction and plan their next move. The moment you opened that door for me, they got exactly what they wanted, a confirmation that you are the link to the file. My mind flashed back to David, my ex, my worthless, scheming ex-husband. He'd been gone for months, but he was always circling back, looking for an angle, a weakness. My ex-husband, I told Marco, the words tasting like ash. He worked at a finance company 6 months ago, the kind that handles a lot of cash transactions. He kept saying he was gonna get rich quick and stick it to the man. He was involved with people who scared even him. Marco snapped up. What's his name? David Collins. He immediately pulled out a smaller, secondary phone, a simple flip phone, and spoke 2 sharp words into it in rapid Italian, before hanging up. He didn't need to hear the answer. The connection was made. David Collins, Marco repeated, testing the name. Small-time problem, big-time mess. He probably stumbled onto a drive with information he didn't understand, and now he's trying to use you as a shield, or maybe as leverage against bigger players. The people I deal with, Sara, are not interested in a few $1,000s. They're interested in millions, in power, and in silence. He walked over to my couch and swiftly grabbed my small duffel bag, the one I used for Lily's weekend sleepovers. He threw it open.
We are leaving now. I am taking you somewhere safe. The phrase somewhere safe sounded deeply unsettling coming from him. Wait, I don't trust you. You came here with an army. You broke my door. How do I know you're not the bad guy? He stopped, holding the bag, and turned to me. His expression was exhausted, almost sad. Look at the window, Sarah. They're watching us. If I wanted the file, I would have tossed this place and taken your daughter as insurance. I have brought 2 cars and 6 men to protect you. The only reason they haven't moved on you yet is because they think I'm holding you here against your will. You are the bait. I am your only protection. I looked at the red pinprick across the street, the tiny, persistent light that was watching my life unravel. He had a point. The people on the other side of that lens, they were the real threat. They knew my name, knew where I lived, and had tried to lure Marco into a trap using my phone. Marco was terrifying, but he was here. He was physical. The danger across the street was spectral, manipulative, and chillingly patient. I made the hardest choice of my life. I walked into Lily's room. She was sleeping soundly, one arm wrapped around her unicorn blanket. I gently shook her. "Lily, sweetie, wake up. We have to go on a trip right now." She mumbled and rubbed her eyes. "A trip, Mommy? Where?" "Somewhere new. It's an adventure. Just for a night. We'll be safe." I scooped her up, blanket and all, burying my face in her soft, strawberry-scented hair. I tried to memorize this smell, this ordinary warmth, because I had a feeling nothing in my life would ever be ordinary again. I walked back into the living room, clutching Lily. I looked at Marco, and for the first time, I felt a desperate kind of respect for the power he commanded. "We go, but if you touch her, or if you lie to me, I will find a way to hurt you. I promise you that." A flicker of something, not amusement, but acknowledgement, crossed his face. He simply nodded. He knew I meant it. He picked up my duffel bag with one hand. With the other, he opened the door and spoke the final, authoritative command to the men waiting in the darkness. "Move her. Now." That word move, it sounded like an order, but for me, it felt like a sentence. I was leaving everything, my home, my routine, my safety net, and walking straight into the arms of a man I knew was dangerous, but who also felt like the only solid thing left in my world. If you're still here, holding your breath, waiting to hear what happened on that terrifying drive, you need to be subscribed right now. Hit the button and stay with me, because what happened in that car changes everything I thought I knew about Marco DeLuca. The cold night air hit us as Marco rushed us down the stairs. Lily was whimpering softly, her head tucked against my shoulder. I wrapped the unicorn blanket tightly around her, trying to absorb some of the terror for her. The black car was waiting right at the curb, engine idling. Marco didn't open the door. Vince, the mountain of a man from inside, did. He ushered Lily and me into the back seat, moving with a surprising gentleness that was completely at odds with his sheer size. Marco slid in beside me, and the door clicked shut with the heavy, airtight sound of a vault locking. The immediate car pulled away from the curb. The entire operation, from Marco's first command to the car speeding silently down the rainy street, took less than 60 seconds. We were gone. I pressed my face against the tinted window, watching my apartment building disappear into the rain-slicked darkness. The red light from the camera was still blinking across the street, a silent promise of danger. Inside the car, the air was warm, smelling faintly of leather and something musky and masculine. Every sound outside was muffled, distorted. It was a metal cocoon, and I wasn't sure if it was protecting me or holding me captive. Marco didn't speak to me. He was immediately focused on his phone, the tiny flip phone. I watched him in the dim light. He had an intensity that was mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. His profile was sharp, his jaw tight.
That word, move, it sounded like an order, but for me, it felt like a sentence. I was leaving everything, my home, my routine, my safety net, and walking straight into the arms of a man I knew was dangerous, but who also felt like the only solid thing left in my world. If you're still here holding your breath, waiting to hear what happened on that terrifying drive, you need to be subscribed right now. Hit the button and stay with me, because what happened in that car changes everything I thought I knew about Marco DeLuca. The cold night air hit us as Marco rushed us down the stairs. Lily was whimpering softly, her head tucked against my shoulder. I wrapped the unicorn blanket tightly around her, trying to absorb some of the terror for her. The black car was waiting right at the curb, engine idling. Marco didn't open the door. Vince, the mountain of a man from inside, did. He ushered Lily and me into the back seat, moving with a surprising gentleness that was completely at odds with his sheer size. Marco slid in beside me, and the door clicked shut with the heavy, airtight sound of a vault locking. The car immediately pulled away from the curb. The entire operation, from Marco's first command to the car speeding silently down the rainy street, took less than 60 seconds. We were gone. I pressed my face against the tinted window, watching my apartment building disappear into the rain-slicked darkness. The red light from the camera was still blinking across the street, a silent promise of danger.
Inside the car, the air was warm, smelling faintly of leather and something musky and masculine. Every sound outside was muffled, distorted. It was a metal cocoon, and I wasn't sure if it was protecting me or holding me captive. Marco didn't speak to me. He was immediately focused on his phone. That tiny flip phone. I watched him in the dim light. He had an intensity that was mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. His profile was sharp, his jaw tight. He took a call. His side of the conversation was rapid in that language I didn't recognize. Italian, I guessed. But even though I didn't know the words, the tone was unmistakable. Authority, urgency, and cold command. Sì, il file non è lì. Ha mandato l'esca. Sì, Collins. Cercatat ora. No, non toccarla. That last part, no, non toccarla, I heard the no and I heard the word for her. He was protecting me, even while coordinating an investigation that was tearing my life apart. He was protecting me from the very people who worked for him. We drove for a long time. The empty streets of South Philly melted into the long, dark highways outside of the city. The rain was drumming a furious, relentless beat on the car roof, a perfect soundtrack to my mounting anxiety. I didn't know where we were going, and every minute that passed made me feel further away from my real life. Lily, thankfully, woke up enough to be coherent, but still drowsy. She lifted her head from my shoulder and looked around the silent, dark interior of the car. Her eyes eventually landed on the imposing figure of Marco, sitting a ramrod straight beside us. She leaned in, her small, warm breath against my ear, and whispered the question that was tearing me apart. "Is he bad, Mommy?" The question was simple, pure, and devastating. I didn't know what to say. Was he bad? He was a man with 2 silent USVs, a language of power, and an obvious connection to a violent world. But he was also the man who told his subordinates not to touch me. I hugged her tighter. He's complicated, baby. He's helping us right now. He's making sure we're safe. Marco heard us. He couldn't have not heard us in the enclosed space. But he didn't move. He didn't look at us. He stared straight ahead at the road, his face unreadable. He offered no reassurance, no denial, and no defense. His silence told me everything and nothing. We left the highway about an hour later. The roads became narrow, winding, and lined with huge, dark trees. The lights of the city were completely gone, replaced by the vast, starless blackness of the countryside. We were truly in the middle of nowhere. Finally, the car slowed. Up ahead, I saw a massive, high wall of wrought iron and dark stone. The gate was taller than 2 men, solid and intimidating, guarded by floodlights and an intercom box. Marco picked up his phone and spoke one word: De Luca.
The gate swung open silently, without a sound. We drove slowly up a winding, tree-lined driveway that seemed to go on forever. Then we rounded a bend, and I saw the house. It wasn't a house. It was a mansion. It was huge, built of light-colored stone, spreading out across the landscape. Warm, quiet lights spilled from the windows, making the interior look inviting and peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm and the fear we brought with us. The air here felt different, silent, expensive, and too clean for real life. It felt like another world, completely detached from the bills and the diner and the dusty little apartment I'd just fled. The car stopped directly under a massive portico. Before Marco could move, a man in a simple, dark uniform opened my door. He was respectful, bowing his head slightly, and his eyes never met mine. Marco stepped out, looked down at me and Lily, and gave the first hint of an instruction that wasn't a command. "It's secure here," he said simply. "You can rest." As the man helped Lily out of the car, Marco took my arm, his grip firm but not painful, and steered me toward the massive, carved front door. He looked down at me one last time, his dark eyes holding mine, and said the last words that would haunt me before the door opened. "Welcome home. For now." Marco's words echoed in the marble foyer as the massive front door swung shut behind us. It wasn't a comforting welcome. It felt like a temporary holding cell. The air inside the mansion was heavy, with a quiet kind of wealth. It smelled faintly of lilies and expensive cigar smoke. The floors were polished to a mirror shine, the ceilings stretched impossibly high, and every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. It felt safe, yes, but also utterly suffocating. Marco didn't lead us to a grand guest wing. He led us to a small, comfortable suite on the ground floor, separated from the main house by a secure, unmarked door. The walls were painted a pale cream. The bed was huge, and there was a bathroom bigger than my entire kitchen back in Philly. He didn't wait for a thank you. He just left, and the heavy door clicked shut. I set Lily down on the plush carpet. She was exhausted and terrified, but she was a fighter. "Mommy, is this where rich people live?" "It is," I said, trying to force a bright, cheerful tone. But the fancy adventure felt like a cage. After settling Lily with the remote control and a few whispered reassurances, I started to explore. I didn't wander far, but I paid attention. I noted the small, perfectly disguised cameras tucked into the molding in the hallway outside the suite. I watched the staff, cleaners and servers, who moved through the halls like ghosts, always looking down, always avoiding eye contact, never speaking a word. They were just as captive as I was, held by loyalty or fear. After about an hour, Marco's lieutenant, Vince, knocked softly. "Marco wants to see you. Now. Alone." My heart hammered. This was it. The real reason I was here. Vince led me through a maze of polished halls until we reached a secluded part of the house, Marco's private study. The door was solid oak, and when I walked in, I understood why this room smelled of leather and rain. It was a place of work, not comfort. A massive desk dominated the room, stacked high with papers and high-tech equipment. A fireplace crackled in one corner, casting a warm, deceptive glow. Marco was standing by the window, looking out into the stormy night. He turned when I entered, his eyes immediately intense. He didn't offer me a seat. On the massive mahogany desk, he had laid out only two objects, a simple manila folder and a distinctive silver cigarette lighter. It was a sleek, antique Zippo, polished smooth from years of handling. He motioned toward the folder. "We're done with games, Sarah. And we're done with wrong numbers. You have something my family needs. I need honesty. No lies about any file. Tell me everything from the beginning." I took a shaky breath. I knew this was my chance. If I lied, I was dead. If I told the truth, I might still be dead, but I'd feel better about it. I started with David. I told him everything. David was always looking for the quick score. He was working as a glorified courier for a company, a legitimate one, that handled huge international transfers. 6 months ago, he started acting strange, paranoid. He'd come home and lock himself in the bathroom to make calls. He told me that he'd found something, a weakness in the system, a way to move money out. He called it his retirement plan. Marco's gaze never left my face. He didn't interrupt, just listened, a quiet predator waiting for the kill. About 3 months ago, he came home terrified, sweating. He shoved something into my hands. It was a cheap, encrypted USB drive. He said, "If anything happens to me, make sure this disappears." I barely glanced at it. I didn't want any part of his schemes. I described the event that broke the camel's back. That same night, someone tried to get into our apartment. Not a break-in, but a careful attempt. I heard the lock clicking, someone trying to pick it. I screamed and they ran. That was the last straw. I told David I was leaving him. I took Lily, packed the essentials, and moved to that awful apartment in South Philly to hide from him and his new life. And I got rid of that drive. I met Marco's gaze directly. I don't have the file, Marco. I told you. I got rid of it. How? He asked, his voice low. I drove to the Delaware River, I explained, gesturing vaguely toward the city. It was still dark. I took the drive, wrapped it in duct tape, and threw it as hard as I could into the water. It's gone. It's been gone for 3 months. Marco listened to the end, standing perfectly still. The silence that followed was agonizing. The only sound was the low, hypnotic hiss of the fire in the grate. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out and picked up the silver lighter. He didn't look at it. He was looking only at me. He flicked the wheel once. Flick. A small, controlled flame burst into the quiet room. He held the lighter, watching the flame dance for a brief second, and then he said the words that turned my entire testimony, my entire memory, into a lie. You didn't throw it away, Sarah. Someone took it. The air felt thin, hot, and impossible to breathe. What? I stammered. No, I did. I drove to the river. I watched it go. Marco snapped the lighter shut. Click. The sudden end of the flame was a harsh punctuation mark. He looked like he was fighting a terrible weariness. You thought you threw it away, Sarah. You told yourself you did. But you are a mother, a cautious, desperate mother, a woman running from an abusive situation. When a person is that scared, they make decisions based on what they can undo. He walked around the desk and stood over me, his presence overwhelming. You threw away a piece of duct-taped trash, but you didn't throw away the insurance policy that could save you and your daughter if David ever came looking again. You're a planner, Sarah. You hid it. No, I insisted, my voice weak, but the certainty in his eyes and the logic of his horrible theory was chipping away at my resolve. Did I throw it away? Did I really watch it sink? I had been so stressed, so desperate to forget that piece of my past. The memory was hazy, fractured. My eyes fell on the silver lighter in his hand. It was beautiful, antique. I found myself staring at it. Just then, his cell phone, the advanced one, not the flip phone, buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, and the change in his demeanor was instantaneous. The tiredness vanished, replaced by a focused, lethal energy. It's Antonio, he muttered, picking up the call. Antonio was his lieutenant. Marco put the call on speaker, resting the phone on the desk. The sound that came through was distant, muffled, and filled with tension. Boss, Antonio's voice crackled. We got him. David Collins. He showed up at the address we gave him, the midnight one. He's at a greasy little diner on North Street, acting jittery, demanding to trade the drive for cash and safe passage. Marco's eyes sharpened into 2 points of cold steel. He took the bait. Good. Antonio continued, his voice tight. He's not alone, boss. He's talking to someone, a runner. They're both nervous. Collins is insisting he has the drive, and he's using your name, saying you are holding his family. Marco gripped the edge of the desk. Now it was war. They didn't think I had the drive. They thought Marco had it, and they thought I was the one who gave it to him. David was trying to leverage his ex-wife's disappearance against the Mafia boss who was trying to protect her. The sheer stupidity of it was astonishing. Do not engage, he commanded into the phone. Observe, wait for him to make the move. I want the drive and Collins alive. He looked at me, his eyes softening slightly, a strange contrast to his deadly command. They're still using you, Sarah. They're demanding a trade for a drive you don't remember having. You are the key to this, the only one who can confirm what's real and what's a lie. He kept me close. He sent his team, but he kept me in the study, right beside him. Why are you protecting us, Marco? I asked, suddenly needing to know the answer more than anything. You could have just arrested David and taken the drive. Why involve yourself with a wrong text and a scared mother? He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the fire, a thoughtful, distant look clouding his features. Because they bait men like me with women like you. They use the innocent to expose the powerful. They counted on me finding you. They counted on my predictable reaction. They thought they could watch me, track me, and then take everything. A new sound blasted through the phone, a sound that cut the tension in the room like a knife. A sudden, horrific explosion. It was loud, metallic, and instantly followed by the sound of breaking glass and a terrified scream. The diner line went dead. The silence that followed was worse than the blast. Marco stared at the phone, his face frozen, then slowly pressed the end call button. The sudden explosion echoing through the speaker, the diner line went dead. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked at Marco, whose eyes were now burning with lethal intent. They didn't want the drive, he whispered. They wanted to take out my entire team, and they just did.
The silence after the explosion was deafening. It didn't feel real. A greasy diner in North Street was supposed to be a low-level trade, not a bomb target. Marco's face was stone. The firelight flickered across his eyes, making them look like cold, burning coals. They didn't want the drive, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. They wanted to take out my team. It was a setup. He immediately grabbed the landline phone on his desk and barked orders in Italian, fast, furious, and filled with a raw rage that was new and terrifying. He told another team to secure the diner site, prioritize the injured, and look for survivors. But his tone indicated he didn't expect to find any. His strategy had been anticipated, and his men were paying the price. Just as he hung up, his advanced phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a text message from an unknown number. Marco opened it, and his shoulders slumped, ever so slightly. He handed the phone to me. The message was stark, simple, and meant to wound. Next time, we come for her. The air felt like glass. They knew I was here. They knew Marco's weakness. They had successfully leveraged me, the wrong number, into a full-scale ambush, and now they were making a direct threat. They were coming to this mansion. Marco turned to me, calmer now, the rage replaced by a terrifying, absolute focus. They want the drive you found, Sarah, he stated, his voice flat. And they are absolutely convinced you still have it. They didn't target David Collins because he was important. They targeted him because he was the only connection between you and me. He was the distraction. He paced away from me, running a hand over the back of his neck. If they are this confident, it means two things. One, they are connected to the people David stole from, the highest level. Two, they have evidence that you didn't throw the drive away. His words slammed into me. They have evidence that you didn't throw the drive away. Suddenly, the haze lifted from my frantic memory. The river, the dark water, the cheap drive wrapped in tape. It was a lie. A beautiful, comforting lie I had told myself for months just to survive. I didn't throw it away. I didn't throw away the insurance policy. I had been terrified of David, terrified of his associates, and I knew that if they ever came for me, the only thing that would make me valuable alive was that secret. My guilt was a physical sickness. I finally remembered the truth, the small, specific, deeply hidden truth. The music box, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Marco stopped pacing. What did you say? Lily has an old wooden music box. It's an antique, a cheap one, but she loves it. It plays Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
When we were moving out of David's house, I panicked. I knew I couldn't trust him, and I couldn't throw away the drive. I told myself I was throwing it in the river, but I didn't. I hid it. Where, Sarah? Be exact. Marco's face was inches from mine.
I hollowed out the bottom of the music box. I put the drive inside, tucked it into a small velvet pouch, and glued the felt back down. It looked seamless. I gave the box to Lily and told her it was a special travel toy, and she had to keep it close. The implication hit us both at the same time. The music box was the only thing from our old life that Lily had insisted on bringing to the new apartment. And the music box was the only thing I had made sure to pack when Marco rushed us out tonight. I had the drive. It was in my luggage, in the suite downstairs, tucked in with Lily's clothes. The ultimate irony. My wrong number text had led Marco right to the one thing David's people couldn't find. It's here, I breathed, relief and renewed terror warring in my chest. It's in the luggage I brought, in the suite. We have it. But Marco didn't look relieved. He looked like I had just signed our death warrants. "You brought the drive with you?" he asked, his voice flat with disbelief. "You brought the one thing that connects us, the one thing they are willing to kill for, into my home." "I didn't know. I didn't remember," I stammered. Marco immediately contacted his security. "Go to the safe suite. Find the girl's luggage. There is a small, wooden music box. Get it, bring it directly to the vault. Do not open it. Do not talk to anyone." I felt a sudden cold premonition, a sick twist in my gut. "Wait! I have to see it. I have to know it's there." I rushed out of the study, Marco right behind me. We ran down the polished hall toward my suite. We found Vince, his face pale, standing by my open luggage. Vince held up Lily's duffel bag. It was empty. The contents, Lily's pajamas, her coloring books, the unicorn blanket, were scattered on the floor. "Boss," Vince whispered, shaking his head. "The staff. They came to clean the suite while you were up here. It was here a few minutes ago. They left. They took it." My breath hitched. My eyes darted to the scattered clothes. Lily's clothes. I scanned the small pile. The music box isn't in my luggage. It's gone. The quiet, suffocating safety of the mansion had just dissolved into a new level of terror. The staff, who had been moving like silent ghosts, were now the thieves. Someone in this house, Marco's home, his stronghold, was working against him. Marco's control was absolute. He didn't waste a second on yelling or panic. He grabbed Vince. "Go to the cleaning crew, interrogate them, now, and lock down the entire compound. No vehicles move, no one leaves a room." He turned to me. "We know the drive is in this house. That's a huge advantage. They don't know that we know that. They still think you're the key." "But who?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Your own people?"
"It doesn't matter who," Marco said, pulling a small black semi-automatic pistol from his belt, checking the clip with a quick, practiced motion. The sight of the weapon made the entire situation violently real. "It matters that the driver's still here. They must be waiting for the all-clear to move it out," I insisted. "We have to get it, Marco. It's my fault. I'm coming with you." He hesitated, looking at me with a calculating glare. "You are a liability." "I am the only one who can identify that music box. I'm the only one who knows exactly where that drive sits inside it. If you find a dozen boxes, you won't know the difference. I'm coming." He stared at me for a long, heavy moment. He saw the fire in my eyes, the desperate, protective fire of a mother who had just realized she had put her child in danger. He must have seen the truth in my words. "Fine," he snapped, "but you stay 3 steps behind me always, and you don't make a sound." We didn't go far. The staff quarters were in the basement, connected by a narrow service staircase, far from the polished halls of the main house. We moved quickly, quietly, like shadows. The basement was a hive of frantic, low-level activity. People were scrambling. Vince and 2 other men had cornered a young woman, a maid, in the laundry room. She was crying hysterically, pointing toward the large industrial washer. Marco strode in, his gun held low but ready. "The music box, where is it?" The maid pointed a shaking finger at an elderly man who was trying to slip out a side door, clutching a large white linen bag. The man was one of the groundskeepers, someone I'd seen briefly, moving silently around the edges of the mansion. Marco and Vince descended on him instantly. The man dropped the linen bag. Inside, nestled among the folded sheets, was the small wooden music box. It was unmistakable. Faded paint, the small metal crank on the side. Lily's music box. I rushed forward and snatched it up. I ran my fingers over the bottom. I felt the faint, slightly raised ridge where I had carefully re-glued the felt months ago. It was the one. "It's here," I breathed, clutching it to my chest like a lifeline. "We have it." Marco didn't even look at the groundskeeper. He simply gave Vince a quick, cold instruction to deal with the traitor and secure the drive in the vault. But when we returned to the ground floor, the house was under silent lockdown. We could feel it. The ambient noise of the mansion, the low hum of electricity, the distant sound of the generator was gone. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the main floor into near-total darkness. Radios are jammed, and the main power is cut. They were waiting for the all-clear that the drive was moving. They're already inside. He grabbed my arm, pulling me into the shadows of the massive study, the room that smelled of leather and rain. He pushed me behind the protection of the heavy mahogany desk. Lily, sensing the shift, was still asleep, carried by one of Marco's men and taken to a secure inner room. Marco took my hand and gripped it, his touch grounding and terrifying at once. "Stay quiet, Sarah. They're already inside. They won't look in here first. They'll look for the vault." I could hear it now, the faint, terrible sound of footsteps, muffled by the expensive rugs, moving through the quiet house. They were close.
I felt Lily's small arms around my leg. No, that was in the outline. This time, I'm alone. A different, more immediate threat. A shadow moves past the window, quick and fleeting, and then, right behind the heavy desk where Marco and I are crouched, there is a distinct metallic click. A gun. Someone is already in the study. The metallic click of the gun's hammer being pulled back was the loudest sound in the universe. It was right behind us, inches from my head. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. Marco, crouched beside me, didn't panic. He moved with a speed and grace that defied his size. He shoved me violently deeper behind the desk and instantly spun, his own pistol raised and ready. But he didn't fire. His shot froze in the chamber. The man holding the gun wasn't a stranger in a black mask. It was Davide, one of the 3 bodyguards who had driven us here. He was standing in the darkness near the fireplace, his face pale and slick with sweat, his expensive shirt torn, a dark stain blossoming on his shoulder. He was bleeding. He looked terrified and desperate, his hand shaking violently as he aimed the weapon at Marco. "Davide?" Marco's voice was dangerously low, thick with betrayal. "What in God's name are you doing?" "I'm sorry, boss," he choked out, the words ragged. "I couldn't help it. They paid. They promised my sister protection. They were going to—" He broke off, overwhelmed by pain or guilt. "The other family," I whispered, the realization sickening. Marco's rivals. They had infiltrated his most trusted circle, paying off a bodyguard to be their eyes and their final weapon. Davide wasn't there to steal the drive from the staff. He was here to retrieve it from Marco's body. "They needed the drive," Davide confessed, his voice tight. "They paid me to be the mole. They thought the old man had it. When you brought her here, they knew you'd get it first.
They told me to wait until the all clear was given to move the drive, then take it and take you out. He lowered the gun slightly, looking past Marco and right at me, his eyes pleading. It's not too late, Sarah. Give him the drive. They'll let you go. They don't care about you. They just need the information. Marco lowered his own gun, but his jaw was clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. This was a direct personal betrayal, and I could see the pain of it reflected in his eyes, far deeper than any physical injury. He didn't forgive, but he understood the leverage they had used. Family. Marco simply looked at Davide. His eyes narrowed. You chose wrong, my friend. They will never protect your sister. They will use her against you until you die, and then they will discard her. Marco took a breath, letting the moment hang, heavy with the weight of the decision. He was giving Davide one last chance.
The drive, Sarah, Marco said, his eyes still locked on the bleeding man. Give him the drive. I hesitated. Give the precious leverage away? The only thing that made us valuable alive? But Marco's face was unreadable. I trusted his cold logic more than my own instincts right now. I reached into my coat pocket where I'd tucked Lily's music box. I pulled it out and looked at Davide. You need to know, I said, my voice steady now. I am not trading this for me. I am trading it for the innocent. I slid the music box across the mahogany floor. It skittered to a stop at Davide's feet. He didn't bend down. He didn't even look at it. He was focused only on Marco. Marco slowly turned and walked out of the study, vanishing into the silent, terrifying darkness of the hall. He left me there, alone, with a desperate, bleeding traitor and the only thing of value in this entire house. Wait, I hissed. Where are you going? His voice came back, low and emotionless, echoing from the darkness. I'm going to finish it, Sarah. Just wait here. I waited. The lights in the house were completely off, the silence broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the faint wet sound of Davide shifting his weight. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I sat behind the desk, clutching my knees, staring at the floor, listening for any noise, a gunshot, a shout, a door slamming. Nothing. The quiet was absolute, terrifying. I thought of Lily, safe in the secure room, and prayed I would see her again. Finally, after what felt like hours, the massive study door creaked open. Marco stood in the doorway. He looked different. His shirt was soaked, dark with water, or maybe something else. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling, and his eyes were dark, unreadable pools. He was holding his gun, which was still raised.
Davide was gone. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't need to. It's done, Marco said softly, the two words heavy with finality and a terrible, immense cost. He walked over to the desk, his footsteps heavy on the expensive carpet. He picked up Lily's music box, then reached into his suit and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He carefully sliced the felt bottom of the box, retrieved the encrypted USB drive, and slipped it into the pouch. He then placed the pouch in his inner breast pocket. The leverage was gone. The threat was neutralized. He looked down at me, his expression softening just slightly, the first hint of human warmth I'd seen since he arrived at my apartment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the antique silver cigarette lighter, the one he had used to emphasize my lie. He held it out to me, hands me the silver lighter. If anyone comes again, Sarah, anyone at all, say my name. Tell them Marco sent you. They will know what it means. That lighter? It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a seal, a promise, a mark of protection in a world where names and reputation meant everything. I took that lighter, and it instantly felt heavy and important in my hand. If you followed the story of wrong numbers and mafia shootouts this far, you absolutely have to subscribe now. You're so close to the truth. You'll see why that simple silver lighter changed my life forever. The storm passed completely. The sun rose over the vast estate, painting the polished floors with golden light. When I woke, I was in the suite, Lily sleeping soundly beside me. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a deep, profound calm. The air was silent, safe, and warm. I got up and checked on Lily. She was fine, still clutching her unicorn blanket, completely oblivious to the war that had been fought just hours earlier in the dark halls of the mansion. I walked out to the main living area of the suite. Marco was standing by the window, the same window he had stood at last night in his study. He was talking low into his phone, not the flip phone, but a standard one. His shirt was a fresh white, his suit newly pressed. He looked immaculate, untouchable. He ended the call and turned to me. He didn't offer an explanation for the night. He didn't offer an apology for the mess. He didn't have to. "You're safe now, Sarah," he said, his voice quiet and firm. "The drive is gone. The information has been erased and accounted for. The threat is contained. Collins," he paused. "Collins is gone. He will not be coming back to you or your daughter." He walked toward the door. I knew what that meant. He was leaving. "Wait," I called out, reaching into my pocket and pulling out the silver lighter. I held it in my palm. "What about this? What does this mean?" He looked at the lighter, then at me. His intense eyes softened around the edges, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I saw a glimpse of the man beneath the polished exterior. A man who perhaps hadn't expected to be moved by a wrong text.
"The lighter," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "is a token. It means you are under the care of my family. It means you call me if the ordinary world ever feels dangerous again. You have my name, my personal line. Use it." He turned to open the door, then paused, his hand on the ornate brass handle. He looked back over his shoulder. "Wrong numbers aren't always mistakes, Sarah," he said, a faint, almost invisible smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Sometimes they reach the right heart." And with that, he was gone. I stood by the window and watched the motorcade roll away, the two massive black cars, the silent SUV. They moved with the same quiet purpose they had arrived with, melting into the winding driveway and disappearing behind the steel gate. I was left standing in the warm sunlight of a safe house, clutching a silver lighter. I had texted danger. I had texted a dangerous, complicated man, and in doing so, I had somehow, impossibly, found a protection and a quiet power I never knew I needed. My life was about to begin again, built not on fear, but on a terrifying, unexpected promise. Resolution. The subtle scent of pancakes drifted from the kitchen. Lily walked out, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, are we still on an adventure?" I smiled, slipping the lighter back into my pocket. "Yes, sweetie, the safest adventure in the world." I never thought a wrong text would lead to a right answer, or that a mafia boss would be the one to give me back my life. But that is the truth. That is my story. The world is full of messages, full of unexpected connections, and full of secrets hidden in plain sight. If this story hit your heart like it did mine, and if you believe that sometimes danger leads you straight to safety, subscribe now, because the next story I tell might just be the message you were never meant to send. Thank you for listening.